It's time for Around the Ozarks Sports Scene, sponsored by Fast Break Sports and The Pitch. Here's your host, Scott Purrier.
Welcome into another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. I am Scott Purrier. As always, thank you for tuning in this week. We talk sports with the newsmakers, the headline makers, and today we visit with the guy who actually writes the headlines, or if you don't like the headline, he didn't write it, somebody else did. We welcome in Wyatt Wheeler of the Springfield News-Leader. Hi, Wyatt. Oh, nice. I see what you're doing. You're going to mess with me now to see if we're actually live. I got you.
Oh, no, it buffered a little bit.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, it cut out. It took you away from me. It's all good.
He's jacking with me already in the first 5 seconds of it. But do you write your own headlines and everything now, or is somebody else still doing that or not?
We write our headlines pretty much. I pass it on to a group of editors that from around the region, kind of even around the country a little bit, to where they're able to optimize it for search engine and everything. So, but no, it starts with me, and then it gets passed along, especially with those stories that you take a little more time on, or a little, instead of just the game immediately after type stuff. But in a lot of cases, there's also a shell to where you know what works and everything as well. But yeah, I do a lot of that.
Well, it's a busy time for you writing headlines because everything is going on right now in another one of the crossover seasons. We've got the winter sports and the spring sports crossover going on now. And of course, that means lots of basketball. We'll talk high school, college. We'll talk some baseball with the Missouri State Bears, maybe a little bit of high school, but wanted to kind of get into first the hot topic. And again, we love bringing Wyatt back 2 or 3 times a year just because he is the guy that covers everything now for the News-Leader. And you know, I have to defend you every now and then when somebody says, well, why didn't you cover this? Because in the days that I was at the News-Leader, there were about 8 to 10 of us, and now there's still just you. So, I mean, you do a heck of a job and trying to figure out where you need to be. And I know you got a conflict this week or a couple of them. You guys just got to figure out what the readers want, don't you?
Yeah, of course. What the big stories are, trying to find a way to get as much as you can, because, you know, there's Missouri State men's basketball playing in the conference tournament. There's the Lady Bears still trying to chase down a conference championship in the regular season. And then you have state quarterfinals going on for small schools, sectionals, and then you have the big schools starting up district play and in the next week, and there'll be conflicts for the next 3 weeks, and depending on what happens with the colleges, how far they go in their conference tournaments, if they're playing in NCAA tournaments, that's something that also throws a wrench in everything. But it's fun. This is what the kids play for every year. This is where interest is high. You get some great endings, and so just a lot of fun throughout these few weeks. So the schedule's packed. Texting the fiance saying, hey, I found a game that I can go to on this night, so I won't be home this night. So go find something else to do, because I'm going to go cover this, and I'm going to go cover this. So it's just kind of an understanding of these 3 weeks are just just really tough.
But like you're laying down the law before the ring's even on the finger, that I'm going to go do this. And that will change approximately mid-July. You know, and you'll adapt and figure out the way it probably really will be from that point on too. So,
well, it's funny. I got advice yesterday. So the wedding is July 19th. A couple days after that is the Conference USA media days in Dallas, and they've talked about sending me there first year and everything, meeting people. So, what's front of Abby's mind is a honeymoon. So it's just like, well, we're going to have to look at dates and stuff to see if she's got to come first with this one before you get in football. But we actually found flights that work out of Dallas, out of where it's just out of things to where I can get everything going. And she's got her 6 days at St. Lucia. So she's
there you go.
So everybody's happy, and we'll have a night in Dallas paid for by the company. if it comes down to that.
Well,
So
I was going to say Dallas is very cool and comfortable in mid-July. So, I mean, I think you ought to just stay there. It'd be a fun honeymoon for any bride. Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah, we love Dallas, but it's all going to work out. But she knows the sacrifice and able to try to make me good at this job, and I make a lot of time for her, so she'll be okay.
There you go. Let's talk about you mentioned the different levels of high school and college basketball going on right now as they're all kind of hitting their peak point. You've had stories in the last few days on the local high school teams with the best chances to bring home a state championship. The small schools, 1, 2, 3s, are in their sectionals and quarters this week. Anything in the small schools that's really caught your eye and surprised you? I see Thayer boys and Fairgrove girls are back on track to where they usually are, but I did see where Hartville boys lost in overtime to Eugene. And was that a surprise?
Not a surprise. Eugene's been the number one team in the state throughout the year. That's where I talked to Brett Reed after they win their district championship, where it's the number 2 team in the state playing number 3 team in the state for a district championship. And the winner of that goes and plays the number 1 team in the state. So talked to Brett Reed a little bit about what can be done and what they'd like to see going forward. When it's a tough thing to ask, it's just, you'd like the best 4 teams being able to advance to the state semifinals. I think we'd like that in any sport, but it's a little more complicated at the high school level when you're talking regional and trying to get bus trips down and everything, and who decides things after a certain period. So I'm disappointed for those kids. There's going to be a team. There could be 3 teams that go to Columbia that aren't as good as Hartville, and the best game of the whole postseason was that Eugene Hartville game. So that goes to overtime. So that's something you keep an eye on. It's just like you would have liked to see that. Greenwood losing to Fairgrove in the first place was a little bit surprising. Colin Clark did go into the tournament with a banged up ankle a little ankle injury that he had a couple weeks before. I don't know how much that hindered their chances at being Fairgrove, but Thayer has a lot. Thayer would have matched up pretty well with Greenwood. They beat them last year in quarterfinals. They just have a pretty good group of winners and long athletic kids and a short point guard who's just a winner. So that not too surprising to see Thayer back in there, but outside of that, not much else. Just kind of keeping an eye on Fairgrove girls might have to play El Dorado Springs in a state quarterfinal instead of the state championship this year. See if Chadwick's able to make it back. They'll play in a quarterfinal Friday night. And then it's just kind of keeping an eye on the big schools as they start up this week.
Yeah. Walnut Grove girls still rolling along too, or?
Yes, they're still in there. So
yeah,
they'll play tonight as we record on Tuesday. And then they'll get back. They could get back into the quarterfinal. Play a state ranked team there maybe. So it's Walnut Grove is usually in the mix, and they're still in the mix right now.
Well, and Brett Reed had a good point, but it's an easier point to make and not as easy to fix. I mean, what I like about following you on Twitter is there's usually some debate from the viewers, listeners, readers, whatever you call social media people. But, I don't know that you can entrust one more thing to Misha to try to handle when they have trouble kind of keeping their ducks in a row anyway on other stuff. And I mean, who's to say, even those state polls are, we've all done that. I mean, that's not science. Well, I think our team's better than your team, even though we have no idea how they would match up. So, I mean, it's just guessing anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't even first thing when I got to the News-Leader 8 years ago, it's like, we're done with state polls. It's like, I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to go into, and I think they did it over like a Microsoft Excel sheet to where they're putting their arguments and they're just like the people from the regions are just like, well, this team did this. This is why they would do this. And it's just like, I'm not going to go in here and say why a Kickapoo would beat a Chaminade. It's just like, I haven't seen them play. I haven't watched Chaminade play. You don't even watch every team in your region unless you're just scoreboard watching this team beat this team by whatever. That I just think of like a point system, an algorithm, just something that to where it doesn't have to be a person deciding it, just a strength of schedule and change the way teams schedule people, of course. But there's got to be some little ways in there. But, I agree with him that it would be nice to have something else, but that goes beyond my pay grade. And I don't want anybody else I don't want just one person or a group of people making decisions and arguing over about it.
With the articles you wrote about best chances to bring home state championships, you feel pretty confident with some of the small school ones still alive? I mean, do you expect a couple winners when we get done next week in Columbia?
Yeah, Skyline Girls seems like that just seems like the heavy favorite, the most, I don't want to say guaranteed, but I mean, that seems the most likely. Fairgrove Girls are right there too. They could play El Dorado Springs on Saturday. And that's a rematch of last year's state championship. El Dorado Springs already got Fairgrove in the regular season this year, but Fairgrove seems to find another level this time of year. The Chadwick boys are still right there in the mix. They probably have the best player in Class 1. There aren't going to be a lot of Class 1 players better than Clayton Garrison. So those are the main ones that are still in the mix that won't have to play one of those juggernauts. Walnut Grove Girls right there too. One of their best players has an ACL tear that she's trying to play through. So we'll see how well she does through that. When that's quite the ask.
Large schools this week, kind of going down the stretch with the districts. Big nights in Nixa with the Class 6 on Friday night with the semifinals. Of course, that opens up tomorrow night. This comes out late tomorrow night, Wednesday night. But you think it's going to come down to, on the boys' side, a Nixa, Republic, Kickapoo, one of those three probably emerges. Is there a chance for an upset down there this week at Nixa?
Yeah, you keep an eye on Ozark because it's as talented as probably anybody. Just I hate to use the word underachieve with high school kids, but I think a lot more was expected from them this year. They have a potential D1 kid on that roster. They have a good scorer that's going to be a D1 baseball player. They have a big man. So you would have liked to see a little bit more of them. But, that's a team you don't want to play in the first round. And Branson's another one of those as well, with some good scorers, tough kids that play hard defense. So do I think they're going to beat a Nixa, Kickapoo, or Republic? That's a pretty tall task for any of them, especially when you consider like a Brinley Hagwood is one of the best players in the area. Mitch McHenry seems to find a different gear for the Chiefs at this time of year. And Brock Blancett's probably been I think, as far as overachieving teams, I think a lot of people would look at Nixa this year when I don't think people thought that this group would be the one to rise the way they have, but just the way they've been able to close games, the emergence of Chase Combs, when it just hasn't been the sophomore Adam McKnight show that it kind of was for a little bit at points last year. So those three seem to be a level above everybody else in that district, to where that Kickapoo Republic game, potential game for semifinals, going to be one to watch. And then whoever you think Nixa, if it is Nixa, whichever one they get is going to be a pretty fun one that Monday night in Nixa.
Yeah, and this Nixa team, it's kind of strange a little bit that, what are they, 23, 24-2 maybe? And when they started hot, they were unbeaten out of state early. Of course, they didn't play a game till almost mid-December, which was a good thing with football, as deep as they went and as many guys they had playing football. But then when they lost to Bolivar in the blue and gold, everybody just kind of, they're not very good. And then they didn't lose again till the semis, I think, of the Nixa Invitational the last week of January. So they have kind of been under the radar, weirdly, for a Nixa school, haven't they?
Yeah, that's what I tell Brock when I see him. It's just like, man, you guys, is like, that's what happens when you lose an early blue and gold game. Yeah. And even those teams that aren't in the blue and gold, when it's your turn out of the SPS rotation, you just kind of get forgotten about a little bit. But they've reminded everybody that they're still there. They finish another COC season undefeated. They win some really good games in there as well. That Kickapoo game where they're able to close out and the way they blew Parkview out of the water, I think really caught a lot of attention. So Nix is really good this year, and it's fun to, when you go to those games, just see Jace Combs playing the way he has. And I know I've said it to you a few times. It's just like the only time I can remember a kid breaking out that well his senior year, in the second half of the senior year, is his brother, Kale, who's playing over at Drake. And Jace comes across as a super sweet kid, and been fun to watch his success.
On the girls' side, Kickapoo, Nixon, that district. What are some of the other classes in the 4, 5, and 6? Do we have teams in 4 and 5 that maybe have a chance at least to maybe get to the Final Four?
Yeah, Rogersville is one that you're watching in the 4. They could meet up with Aurora again in a sectional because they play sectionals in Class 4. So the Logan Rogersville Aurora game, Aurora won last year, and then the winner would maybe play Stratford or Owensville. Stratford's been playing without the oldest Larson sister, who's a Class 3 Player of the Year last year. So one of those two teams looks like it has a pretty good shot. Rogersville's been playing so well, and Aurora's got one of the best scorers in the state. So keeping an eye on them. That Class 5 District 6 is pretty loaded. When you look at Marshfield, West Plains, Hillcrest, all in the same district, those are conference opponents in the Ozark Mountain Conference. So any of those 3 teams can come out of it. West Plains has been playing the best of the 3 entering the postseason. The quarterfinal would be tough, and you have a state ranked, and then you have the number 1 team on your side of the bracket for a potential semifinal. So maybe paying attention to that district as well, and then of course the Class 6 district where you're looking at Kickapoo and Nixa. Kickapoo, just remembering that game when they lost to Nixa, missed a lot of layups, just some uncharacteristic things in there to where you think that they can fix up some of the stuff that they struggled at when, this is usually Kickapoo's time of year where it goes on a run and plays in a state championship only to lose to Incarnate Word, because that's what it does to everybody. But Nixa, I'm not surprised by its rise with Jenny Talbert. She was really good at Fair Grove and has that Nixa team playing a ton of different girls on that Nixa team, capable of playing some good games. So see if Nixa can get over that hump when Kickapoo has a lot of championship experience still on that roster.
Kind of jump back to the larger school boys and that Rogersville boys team playing really well. Talking to some of their fans and they may steamroll. Is that Vashon's Class 4?
Oh yeah, no,
all the way to maybe the title game, and then take your chances, right?
Man, I really would like to see. I think that's the one matchup I would like to see out of everything, is just getting Chase Branham going up against Trey Williams. Sophomore Branham, he's gonna be the one most he's best recruit since Aminu Muhammad came through. You see there's power 4s on him a lot. Missouri State recently just jumped in. And I really like Rogersville's path. It's got Forsyth, and then it might have Aurora in the sectional, and then and then they'd probably play kind of like a Father Tolton, where they still have Aaron Rowe over there, a 5-star kid who played over at Lake Academy for a year. Yeah. So they beat them last year, and they were able to get through that. But I like their path. Vashon with Trey Williams, he's a Missouri State edition. He's probably the best Missouri State high school signee since Dana landed Isaiah Mosley and DeJuan Harris, who ended up starting point guard at Kansas. So would like to see that matchup, just to be able to have that storyline going in. But Rogersville's probably been the best, most consistent team in the area this year. And Schaefer might be the best coach in the region. They got the best player in the area. And that team's just getting older and better, getting closer to a state run.
Before we move on to the colleges, Central and Parkview, Class 5,
Yep.
they're going to battle it out to see who gets out, and then what does their path look like for either one?
Yeah, Parkview's gotten better since that Nixa game. That's one. I think that was just kind of the wake up call. They everybody there needed. The winner of that. So you still have Hillcrest in that region, in that district. Hillcrest is a talented team, can upset anybody in there. It's kind of been up and down throughout the second half of the season. But Central Parkview, they went to 2 overtimes last time when they played on Valentine's Day. Bulldogs made the Final Four run last year. Vikings came a few free throws short. So I think that's going to be a really competitive game if we get it. The winner is going to have to go to state-ranked Rolla. Rolla's got one of the best players in the state. Ethan Brown on that roster. He's going to end up I know Missouri State's been on him. I know Drake's been on him. I know several. I know the Power Fours have kind of backed off a little bit, which is, they probably would be on him more if we were in a few years ago and that era of college basketball. But he's a great player. The semifinal, they're on the side of number 3 Raytown at the same time. So, but yeah, it's like Central's been there. They have. Keon Epps is just kind of a winner to where I have a hard time betting against that kid. Really good Drury recruit that would be a Division I kid in the previous era of college athletics as well. So I'm excited to see what he does there. But we'll see. I'm anxious to see what comes from that because Parkview's looked a little bit better in recent weeks.
Well, I'm going to take full blame now for the demise of the Lady Bears after I had Lacey and Stokes and Cayman Beckemeyer last week as my guests, and they go out on the road and they drop two games. Now they're in a little bit of a pickle, 22-7 overall, 14-4 in the Valley. Got 2 big ones at home to finish up the regular season. Is there a chance, kind of like you were talking about the Parkview boys, that maybe that road trip got their attention and we see the best version of Lady Bears the rest of the way?
Yeah, you hope so. It's been a fun team, and those girls. I mean, you had Cayman and Lacey on, and they're 2 of the best kids we've had come through the area over the last however many years. And Lacey's story and her career arc has just been phenomenal to watch since watching her take Mount Vernon to a state championship game, playing extremely well at Missouri Southern, and then coming and being the Lady Bears best player for 2 years, Cayman just being a stud in the area for so long. But yeah, you think it might be a wake-up call. Illinois State's not going to be a cakewalk on Thursday night. That's the biggest remaining game in the entire conference because that game can send the Lady Bears from anywhere to 1st in the league to 5th in the league. And 5th in the league is missing out on a first-round bye and everything, and as comfortable as you were last week. And the feeling going into that would be quite the flip-flop. And, the Lady Bears have been playing with fire as much as we'd like to talk about their double-digit comebacks the week before where they're able to force overtime with Northern Iowa. Drake beat them both in overtime. They get in those deficits again this past weekend at Murray State and Belmont, and they're not able to overcome them. So that's where you got to see that fixed. We can't really celebrate the comebacks anymore. Get a lead and stick with it. Play a consistent game. But you look at the other teams that they're fighting with their schedules. Murray State, Belmont, they play Indiana State, Evansville, 2 of the worst teams in the league. Illinois State goes to Southern Illinois after playing the Lady Bears on Thursday. And Southern Illinois is one of the worst women's basketball teams I've ever watched. So it's Thursday night is ginormous. Lady Bears went out. They're the 1 seed or the 2 seed, depending on how the Drake games goes, because their net ranking is likely going to be below Murray State's. You lose to Illinois State, beat Bradley, you have a first-round bye at the very least. So if you get Lady Bears get one of these next 2 games, they get a first-round bye. you lose both, you're facing the possibility of being a 5 seed, needing Drake to win, to lose a couple games. So it's tough. It's that Illinois State is a good team. Already beat the Lady Bears before. That coach has done pretty well against the Lady Bears in recent years. Really limited Lacey when they played earlier this year in Normal. So that's Thursday night's a big one for the Lady Bears.
Big help for the Lady Bears that they are 26-1 the last 2 years at home, and I think they're 12-0 this year. So yeah. I'm sure the motivation to finish that out, stay undefeated at home when you need it most. On the flip side, I'm kind of tying this in with some of the stuff you've done about the atmosphere and attendance and things like that, but just a very disappointing, awful season for Conzo Martin's Bears. 9-22 overall, 2 wins in the conference, 2 and 16, 18, I think. Yeah. And did you see this even remotely happening, or what did you? Because I think didn't you have them pick maybe the 3rd tier in the league or even mid-tier coming in?
I picked them 10th entering the season. Okay. So out of 12, I picked them 10th. And I thought that would, and I only did that because I thought I did. So the roster construction, I was very concerned about. I know Conzo was brought in late, but you're looking at guys who didn't average double figures at their JUCO or Division II. Guys who transferred that didn't put up the biggest numbers at the same time. So I was pretty nervous about that, but I gave them 10th, just assuming Conzo would get the most out of them, just an upgrade in coaching from previous years. And they struggled with SBU in that exhibition game, and you're watching and you're like, oh no. It's just like all the greatest fears came to play, but they come out and they play a good game with Butler to open the season. They beat High Point, who looks like an NCAA tournament team right now, one of the better mid-majors in the country. They beat them at the MTE. They win some. They stay competitive in other games. They get some other wins in non-conference play where it's just like, okay, they can at least be maybe competitive in Valley play. And I don't know if they haven't been competitive when you look at the way they've lost a lot of these games. Have just been come down to the buzzer and they lose when it felt like they'd inevitably lose at the buzzer in most of these games. But it's a super disappointing season when you wanted more, you needed more from the program. You would have liked to have a better send-off in Valley play, but 2-18 is that's going down as the worst regular season in the school's Valley history, and it's going to be remembered as one of the worst seasons in Missouri.
And your swan song too, your last one, And so, well, how do you balance and explain a team going 2-18, but taking the best team in the league to overtime twice, with Drake. And this would be the weirdest season to try to put a grade on or an evaluation or a summary, because it just doesn't add up in a lot of areas. And, I had questions because Conzo was, he was out, after the Mizzou job and things changed. I mean, the NIL started happening and the portal started taking off like wildfire, and it's a different world now. And, you gotta be able to buy some kids, and you got to be able to convince kids that they're going to play in a fun system. And all those things were question marks for Conzo coming in, but I don't really know whether to say it's him, it's the situation, or were they as bad as the record shows? It's just kind of a mystery all the way around, isn't it?
It is strange. And, a lot of Bears team, it's just kind of fatigued of the never quit storyline that's kind of gone around this team all year. It's just like, it could have been much worse. You trust that there is a culture and everything in that locker room to where, they are playing until the final game of the regular season, forcing overtime against Drake. They forced overtime against Drake twice when you were double-digit underdogs. I have it right here. Of their 22 losses this season, only 4 weren't competitive in the second half. So they should have won a handful of those games, failed to close out, whether it was free throws, whether it was just some late game management, just inability to score down the stretch was another thing to where I stay patient through a year. He didn't have the best situation. I think everybody could say that. The two administrators aren't there anymore who kind of set up that situation over the last decade plus. So he's got a lot of work to do. He's going to overhaul this roster.
How many guys are back, do you think?
I've heard 8 to 9 new players next year.
Okay.
Out of the
15, 14?
13, 15 that they have a couple walk-ons. And that's not a bad thing. I just go back to this quote that Dave Steckel one time had after one of his bad seasons, when that's all he had, when he said, "Yeah, the good thing is we have a lot of guys coming back, but the bad thing is we have a lot of guys coming back from a bad team." So it's So I think Konzo knows that this roster needs an upgrade. He's spoken. He hasn't really expanded on, but he sounds very confident in what he's been doing recruiting. I asked him about that after the last home game, and he wouldn't budge on really telling me anything on that. But and the expectations were low this year, but demands are going to be higher for going in the next year, to where I can forgive one season when you're hired late and haven't been around the game for a bit, but you really need to show something next year. And that's going to have to start from night one, and some of this roster building, and just kind of raise our eyebrows at some of the guys that he's getting, because when we know the last guy could recruit in this era of college basketball and get some talent in there and attract guys to Missouri State. But Konzo didn't do that in year one. And I think that's you can make all the excuses you want, but that needs a change going into next year.
And of course, I guess Missouri State fans can draw inspiration from Mizzou, even though they would never admit it. You look at Dennis Gates going 0-19 in the SEC a year ago, and now they're one of the better teams in the league and in the country too. So, I try to keep up a little bit on this with the CUSA, and the Valley, and looking at the men's side. Conference USA is ranked as the 8th strongest conference. The Valley is 10th. On the women's side, it's flipped, where the Valley is 9th and CUSA is 12th. All the things that were said when the announcement was made to join Conference USA, and that it would be a better league or an easier path or all those things, depending on which sport. Are you buying any of it now, or is it kind of a lateral move league-wise across the board?
Lateral move. That's been the case all year long for Conference USA, is that it's ranked ahead of the Valley. Just some of its non-conference wins and some of those things. And I look at the KenPom ratings, and we put Missouri State second to last in the league this year, only ahead of Florida International. So that's something I've kept an eye on. I asked Konzo, just kind of trying to pick his brain about recruiting and some of the needs, and he's just like, basketball players will form a roster that fits us and just in what we do. So it's like, okay, so it's gonna be another Konzo rock fight roster, and try to get some skill in there at the same time. But it's going to be a lateral move. You're going to go from one bid league to one bid league unless Drake somehow pulls out an at-large bid. So that's just kind of how it is. Missouri State will get more money to play football.
New director of athletics, Patrick Ransdell. We've known all along this first year was going to be kind of an evaluation year. He's starting to make some decisions and moves, like with bringing in almost a director of game environment type position. It's something that's near and dear to your heart, the environment. Can't really judge the men's crowds because this has just been an awful year and people aren't going to go watch, 2-18. On the women's side, probably a better gauge. Have you seen an increased level of attendance, environment, enthusiasm? And one thing you pointed out that I really think is accurate is the way they're counting things now are differently than they were in the past. So it's really hard to go numbers to numbers in terms of attendance. But do you feel a different vibe with the women now in the building a little bit?
Yeah, I think there have been some really good games to where you felt like there were a lot of people there. And I think you would have you just go off years past and how they announced some of these games, these numbers would be much higher. I don't think they would have announced 3,000 for this year or announced what they did this year for men's basketball last year. I think they would have edged it again to get back to that 3,000 number. But it's something I've kept an eye on, and I've got requests out to try to get some of the real numbers and everything. And I commend Patrick Ransdell for being way more accurate than they had been at least last year and maybe years before that on some of how they've counted it. But Lady Bears fans are engaged. They will show. I would assume they show up for this Thursday night game, considering how important it is. I would assume Mount Vernon shows up on Saturday to send Lacey out on Senior Day pretty well. So it's been a fun year for to go to Lady Bears games, and it doesn't matter if there's more or fewer people there. They're engaged. They're smart fans. They know when to engage in everything, and I'm excited to see what Patrick does going into next year, because it needs to look different. And if it's not going to look different from opening night, I think there are going to be some concerns when he came in and said some of these things, like what he was going to try to do with get people back in the building. But I do think he actually understands what the importance is and going to make some hires to try to make sure that's better.
Don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's out of season, but did Ryan Beard and the football team survive the portal poaching pretty well? I know that not a long time till they go to USC for that opener, which sounds weird to even say, go to USC. And then, of course, the big CUSA home game debut with Southern Methodist coming in. And I'll just say it now that if Art Haynes isn't out there for the coin toss for that one, I'll be severely disappointed. That ought to happen, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I know he's more concerned about being in the booth for that one. He is calling that game, so
that's true. Yeah, we got to figure out logistically maybe a camera at least up in the booth and let him flip it.
It'll be a special night, and hey, gosh, they better sell that thing out.
If you're going to sell out a home game, if you don't sell out that one, you're not going to sell one out, probably.
Yeah, it's ever. Yeah. I mean, this is a college football playoff team, and you have to sell that one out. So,
was the portal okay to the Bears? Did they lose?
The portal was good to the Bears. They kept their quarterback, which is priority 1, 2, and 3. They lost probably their feature running back going into the year. Jaden Becks transfers out. He goes to North Texas near his home, to where he grew up. And, they added some receivers. They probably need to add some more offensive linemen. They added some edge rushers, redoing some things at linebacker. So, and the secondary. So I like what they did. I don't think there's any reason to panic about some of the losses they had, and they fill it with Shamari Lawrence is a Florida International running back transfer. They had a couple of their best high school recruits in program history, which is what you would expect going into Conference USA. But to actually see like the top 3 24/7 sports ranked recruits in your program's history, that's a pretty cool thing. So I'm anxious to see what they do. They left about 10 scholarships open for the next few months, knowing that there is going to be another portal window here about a month, to where they're going to need to add some offensive linemen, add some spots of defensive tackle. So they've done that. I think they did a pretty good job adding to what they needed to do with an expanded roster.
Any panic signs yet, or any concerns with Joey Hawkins and Bears baseball? They're 4-6. Of course, that includes a 3-game sweep loss at Mississippi State, which is a top 20 program. This is traditional Missouri State baseball, February and early March, where the bats are little dormant. The pitching needs to round into form quickly and hasn't. The bullpen's been a problem, but 11 runs in back-to-back games at this taping, so the offense may be starting to heat up a little bit. You feel like this thing with that offensive group is going to get untracked and get rolling?
Yeah, the offensive group is the one that you trust. I think Zach Stewart's had a little bit of early season struggles, but I think that's something that he can figure out. He's still an MLB prospect and just needs to relax a little bit and get some things down. But Bogan Poles has been as good as advertised, and just run down the list of the offensive firepower they have. And the question is always going to come down to pitching, and that's been the case since Joey's gotten here as a hitting coach. The offense will be there. The pitching is what needs to at least hold teams to 5 runs or maintain your leads when you're in the late innings. And you should have had a couple of those, whether it was a Friday game against Mississippi State would have been awesome to be able to come out of that with. There was a recent game this past weekend where they give up 8 runs in the ninth or 8th and 9th to where they ended up coming short. So they need the. I'm more patient than others when it comes with that, but you're watching that bullpen and seeing if they can figure that out.
You're getting ready to join a Conference USA that's got more southern warm weather teams involved, and I checked a glance at their standings. I think they've got 3 or 4 teams already with double-digit wins. Going to be a challenge for Joey and scheduling going forward to figure out how to get more winnable warm weather games early on to get some momentum and get some confidence, because those Mississippi State series are great if you can pull off a win or 2 even, for your resume. But at the same time, you're digging yourselves a confidence hole maybe and a momentum hole early on where you got to really dig out. So I don't know what the answer is. Do you see where they turn for that?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's you read that you say there's 2 to 3. There's 3 teams in Conference USA with 10 wins already. Yeah. And not all of those are the strong teams. Like DBU's 8-3, and that's the team you expect to come out of that. Louisiana Tech is a great baseball school. They're out there. They're down there as well. You look at I think you would probably look at the way that they scheduled when those are your favorites. They schedule a Southern Miss, which is a proud baseball program. Yeah. Early on, you get Dallas Baptist played a game against LSU at Globe Life Field in Arlington. So just kind of there are some feature programs in that field to where you're trying to get those. You of course probably keep your Arkansas, you keep your Oklahoma State, maybe get a little more Oklahoma in there to where you have some of those regional teams, but keep your SIUEs, your Central Arkansas, just some of those. I don't know if you add Southern Illinois when it's been a pretty good baseball program, but just trying to keep SEMO, just keeping some of those and keeping those within your schedule. But those aren't the warm weather ones, and you're kind of banking on some of the gross days like today to hold up for you.
We'll talk more spring sports when we come back here in a couple months and kind of look at the championships and things like that. One other thing I wanted to kind of talk about, she's become a national story right now. Molly Miller, the former Molly Carter Miller, a Kickapoo High School star, Drury coaching star, completing year 5 at Grand Canyon University. They're 27-2 this year. They've got the nation's longest winning streak at 25 games. Molly's continued her ridiculous winning percentage. She's ready. And timing-wise, you've got Missouri that's going to be open and Arkansas is going to be open. I'm sure that both would have an interest because of her regional ties and her recruiting prowess in this area. But what if? I know every year Missouri State's got to worry about every time Beth Cunningham wins 24, 25 games with her pedigree and some of the benches she's been on, somebody coming after her. A, do you see Beth staying put with what she's got coming back? And B, the previous regime was probably not going to go down that former Drury coach path again. What about Patrick Ransdell? If a Molly Miller were to make sense, would they and Beth left, would they throw their hat in for her, you think, or not?
Yeah, I don't see Beth leaving this year. I think especially these last couple of games really probably took a hit there. I think you'd have to look at some kind of tournament run before looking at that. I think Beth's great. I think she's destined to end up at some kind of SEC school or some kind of power program eventually. Arguably, she should be the Notre Dame coach right now. I think there were probably people that thought when Muffet retired that they should have just moved her down a chair. Now, it's worked out for Notre Dame when they've been among the top teams in the country this year, but she's a great coach, and you would have liked to see them close some of these last two games. And I think it'd take a special tournament run and a Valley Championship to get in there. I don't know if the W or the new tournament that they do at the end of the year would be enough to people circle that enough to make it like that's going to be your championship run that gets you noticed. But I don't know if Molly would want Missouri State at this moment when you see her career trajectory. At the same time, I think it's a no-brainer for somebody
probably
like
a lateral move, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Patrick's got to make the phone call, but I think it's more lateral to where she's looking at SEC now. She doesn't need to look at Conference USA to be able to make that your your next spot. When you're SEC, I'm sure you've got the Mizzou job if you want it. I'm sure you have the Arkansas job if you want it. But you want to see how much are these programs going to invest in women's basketball when we've seen a lot of programs in the Caitlin Clark era really start to invest and make that a priority. It is a priority here in Springfield, to where that is something you keep an eye on. But it's this is probably her best chance to jump. How is she going to have any better years than what she's having now that would land her something bigger? I mean, this is the next step before the elite programs, whether that's Tennessee or UConn or some of those major programs that never change coaches and the ones that just define women's basketball. So Molly's got to make that jump now, I would think. And Drury, I'm looking at this right now, and it breaks that Amy Egan is the Ohio Valley Coach of the Year, and how
tremendous job at Lindenwood for Amy. Yeah,
and just what Lindenwood's done and what she's done at Lindenwood. So that's just another name in the Beth Cunningham future that you kind of circle. And do you make a run at somebody that all she's doing is winning, and that's. Just go get the next Drury coach, I guess. But those are just names you continue to circle, especially when they have that connection down here.
Yeah, Amy took over a 2-24 team the year before she got there, 1-7, and I think she's up to 21 or 22 or something like that now. Just
several first teamers on that roster, and they can make a run, and that's just another name to stash away for future times. But who knows if she's able to make a jump before Missouri State comes open now. So that's all they're doing is winning. And that's their motto, I guess, at Drury.
Yeah. Well, Casey Bailey now back-to-back 20-win seasons over there. So it just continues, so it's a good string they're riding there with successful coaches. So Wyatt, appreciate your time. Always a great chance to catch up and on several topics, and let's do it again this spring and try to survive the crossover season, okay?
I'm sure I'll see you out at Nixa or something, but I'll try to survive. Good talking to you.
Very good. You bet. Thanks, Wyatt. Wyatt Wheeler of the News-Leader. As always, we appreciate his time. Special guest to have on. And like when we have Chris Parker from the Ozone, just love to cover so many topics. And it's easy to do with guys that are out there every night busting their rear to find the stories. So that's going to do it for this week's edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. Very special thanks as well to our sponsors, the Pitch Pizza and Pub, located in the shopping center off of Southern Hills Shopping Center off East Sunshine, and then Fast Break Sports on South Campbell, your home for all things sports cards and collectibles. They are our sponsors. We certainly appreciate them, and we appreciate you tuning in and listening to the podcast and watching now that we've got the video version of the podcast. As always, thank you, and we will see you next week on Around the Ozarks Sports Scene.